Another Alaskan monster found me, this time in the fog. Where should I start? Let's start with the fact that one of my sisters got on my case about not sharing a story yet, even though it's only been a couple weeks. She's become obsessed with it. Why wouldn't she? She was there. But of course only the elders and young children believe her, us. And you dear friends, you always believe me, don't you? You believe the stories from the last frontier are real, that you're never to whistle at the northern lights, that monsters will follow you home, and surely you've learned to listen and heed Owl when he speaks? Enough of that though. I really ought to share this most recent adventure, and this time I have a witness. She's sitting right next to me, pestering me, telling me to write. She told me to clarify, yes, I'm back home in Alaska for the fishing season that's wrapping up. She said context is important. I just told her to let me tell our story. She's miffed about that, and so it goes. Still, here is our story. My sister Joy and I decided it'd be a fun time to float the rivers during one of the few breaks our father gave us from fish camp. It was going to be a wild ride, starting in Nanana, up the Tanana River where it joined with the Yukon in, you guessed it, Tanana. Our final destination was Galena where we'd pack our gear, leave the canoes with some cousins, fly back to Fairbanks then return to our regular lives at fish camp. It wasn't our first trip along the Yukon, we are from there after all, but it would be the longest canoe trip, just the two of us. A 10-day journey with how many camping stops we planned on making along the way, weather permitting. Weather permitted. The Alaskan legends didn't. Have you heard of the fog that can appear on the Yukon? I had, but I'd never seen it. During the lovely days it was calm and the sun warmed your skin. During the bad days it would be rough and choppy, water wishing to pull you to their depths. But never had I seen the fog, even in the sloughs and marshes. The first 3 days were lovely. We paddled from Nanana to Manly Hot Springs, taking our time and enjoying the lodge there for a night before continuing our adventure to Tanana. To say it was breathtaking is an understatement. The geophysical changes along the route make it a sight to behold with rocky cliffs and untouched forest. We arrived in Tanana ready for a quick rest at our cousin Will's house. Eat your veg, the grandmothers would tell us as we visited. Here, replace your gear, drink this medicine. The standard fare of elders in Alaska, and not just the elders. The aunties and uncles got in on it too, teasing and prodding us. It was after one final visit to another family member that we took our overstuffed bellies to cousin Will's house. We weren't prepared for the sight of one more grandmother waiting for us inside. We were greeted warmly, but Judy's smile didn't meet her eyes. After a few pleasantries and more food, we were given the purpose of her visit. Don't bother getting your gear ready, girls, she told us. Joy and I passed each other looks and hid our frowns. We need to be ready to leave tomorrow or we'll be behind, Joy explained. There's a fog comin' in downriver. That's fine. We'll pull off if the time comes, but we can't be too behind schedule. Joy replied apologetically. Chi, you girls know nothing. And you, Rosemary, you know better. Even I've heard of ya. I frowned at the chastisement. I'm not alone this time. Wire and Elia told me to get you down river safe, but if you won't listen I can't do nothing good for you kids these days. Will looked at us from across the room and shrugged. We're sorry. Our preparations won't allow us another night, Joy responded. Judy sighed. You kids are always welcome here, but if not, then take these with you. She handed us a light, medium-sized sack filled with prepared plants. This is for the bugs, this cuts, this one here is for headaches and broken bones, and this is for blisters. She gave us an eye and pulled at the last one, for wire cough. I gratefully accepted the gift and received one last eye. Yes, Mim, now get your final night of rest, and don't forget to listen to Dotrin. He'll be following ya. Judy left soon after, allowing us to sit down and deflate. I don't understand why you won't just humor them, Will commented. We're on a tight schedule. I remember the final glare I gave him. You can delay one day, not if we're gonna make it back to fish camp on time. Joy replied, all right. He sighed out, and she's right. Keep an eye out for ravens. You know to listen to them, right, Rosemary? I nodded and sighed. I know who to listen to and who to run from. Will gave me one last frown. Go get sleep. It's getting late. It would take us much longer than an extra day to finally return. The first 2 days were fine, long sunny days under the midnight sun, heating us to the point we were down to our brass and shorts under our puffeds. The only other life we came across were the occasional moose and bears. Peregrines were diving everywhere during the day and we woke to the songs of swallows and chickadees. Things were great. We were making good headway. Until we weren't. Until one morning, several days later, we came across the fog grandmother Judy warned us about. Joy cursed as we pulled our canoes up the riverbank. we're almost to Ruby. Why here? We took a seat on the bank as the fog swirled our way. It's the marshes further ahead. We just have to wait for the sun to come further up. Joy did her signature nose wrinkle. Chi, it's summer, idiot. The sun's always up. Yes, that part about Alaska is true. Let's stretch out for a nap, I guess. The rest was welcome after waking up so early, but it was short-lived as we woke to the sound of a raven croaking above us. The fog still surrounded us as we got up to stretch. It was as my sleep-addled brain woke up I heard a strange sound, a soft thudding coming from the riverbank. What's that? I whispered to Joy. Suddenly, the fog seemed like a wall between us and our gear. Through the fog, I could barely see her as she shrugged. Let's look. We eased forward slowly through the dense haze, watching our footing as we approached the river's edge. It was as we left it. No animals were in sight and gear still safe, but there was a strange addition. Another canoe sat next to ours, tapping slightly against Joy's as the river pushed it up and down the bank. Get it? Joy said, and I darted forward, pulling the canoe next to ours as Joy looked up and down the few feet we could see of the river. Frick, we need to find the owner. Joy began screaming into the fog. Hello, is anyone out there? Looking down at the canoe, I shuddered. It wasn't just the reminder of how easily you can go missing here that bothered me, but it felt wrong. I couldn't quite place it, but the canoe fell off. A soft alarm began buzzing in my head, shaking off the feeling. I searched their supplies for any identifiable gear to no avail. It looked like it had already been ransacked even. They can't be close by. Who knows where along the river they are? I told her, the Yukon is very unforgiving. Well, we have to find them. Maybe they're a little further upstream. Chi, we're fogged out. We wouldn't be able to see them no matter how hard we tried. What are we supposed to do? I looked down at the canoe. We need to find out who they are. Help me get this further up. We pulled the canoe up the bank where we began digging through things in earnest, all the while the fog somehow growing thicker, seeming to cause movement in the corner of my eyes. After a few minutes, Joy finally spoke. Does something feel wrong to you? She asked. I looked up at her and shivered as I saw the fog beginning to swallow her. But somehow I could still see some of the river beyond her. I wasn't going to say it. I wouldn't. I watched the shadows of other canoes and kayaks float downstream. Or was it upstream? What direction did the river flow anymore? Did it matter? It was a fleet of the dead and damned. All sound had stopped, yet somehow eyes were on us in the fog while she began to take on a hazy form. I ignored the question. Have you found anything identifiable? Nothing but food supplies. They weren't on a long trip, that's for sure. I know she couldn't see it through the fog, but my frown grew deeper as I heard a whisper. I fought to ignore it, fought to ignore the tickling in my ear. Joy, do you see anything weird? I asked, slowly standing, eyes scanning the now wall of fog. I can't see anything. No, I mean the canoe. Do you see anything wrong with the canoe? There's nothing broken if that's what you're asking. And there's no water in it. And there's nothing else. What kind of canoe is it? I heard her feeling around it. It's birch. My hair stood on end. What kind of food supplies and cookware did you find? Smoked salmon, a small pot, some rice, and a few root veggies, and freeze-dried foods? I heard her rummage through the canoe. None. Her voice dropped lower. I almost stopped breathing. Clothes. Are there any clothes up there? I asked as I dropped next to the canoe and began digging through the gear I had found up front. Nothing but fishing nets and woven baskets. Suddenly the eyes felt close, as if they were waiting to see my reaction. I risked looking up in Joy's direction. Joy, yeah, she whispered. Which direction is the river flowing? I can't tell. Which direction is your canoe? It should be right there. She looked around. I don't see it. I slowly felt my way to the back of the canoe. How do you feel? Like something is looking over my shoulder. A raven croaked above us. It's just the birds, I whispered and grabbed Joy's hand, finding it shaking. You know it's not. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't want to. I heard a whisper in my ear and the tracing of fingers down my scarred back, the scars that were proof of my damaged yega from years ago, the tears that allow spirits to see my nukabed zip to covet it, and the fog wanted it. The whisper was in the language I was familiar with but never bothered learning. And I understood at least one word, one name. Joy. Yes, get in the boat. What? I said get in the boat. I heard her clumsily clamber in and listen for the non-existent wildlife. Don't leave the boat. What? Don't leave the boat. No matter what. I knelt next to her, gripping her hand. Lot of luck, this'll do us, Joy whispered. This really helped the owner. I'm going to say something and you're not gonna like it. I paused, thinking it through. Tohi, don't you dare finish that. I had began whispering the name of the owner of this fog. A quiet splashing began a few yards from us, and I stiffened as a raven flew over us. Joy, no. We'll be stuck here forever if we don't do anything. Her eyes were pleading, begging not to move. A small rumble that I swore was a laugh broke the silence between us, and it was just as suddenly cut off by the raven landing in front of us. Its big black eyes assessed us and hopped onto the end of the canoe, beckoning us to move. Joy, her eyes were suddenly glassy, bordering to tears. I can't. We'll be stuck here though. I looked back at the raven and swallowed. Trust us, trust me, trust Raven, trust Grandma Judy if anything. I felt sick as my feet entered the water before pushing the canoe until it was fully removed. I peered through the fog, our gear nowhere in sight. I'm going to find our canoes. Hold tight. Don't leave me. I gave Joy a smile and squeezed her shoulder. It's okay. Just remember, I make good bait. Don't joke like that. Hey, you'll be fine. My egg is already broken, so my soul smells tasty with fear right about now. You're going to be nice and hidden as long as you stay here. I sounded confident, or at least I hope I did. Really, I was ready to piss myself. I was about to walk into a trap set just for us and pray that a miracle would happen. I heard Joy gasp. Wait, she began rustling about. Take this. She handed me one end of a rope. Don't go beyond it. I stared at the old, frayed rope in my hand. It was wrong. It was all very wrong. There was no way anyone would be floating down the river so minimally these days, not when we had everything to be safe in modern times. But what does time matter to a legend? Time was long gone, judging by the boats I had seen earlier. Walking along the water, I fought off the chill that the fog brought with it, caressing my skin and making my hair stand on end. The silence was deafening, and I screeched when it was shattered by the raven whisking past me to land feet in front of me. Are you really here to help this time? I asked him and continued walking along the water's edge. It tilted its head and hopped a few feet further from me, barely within my field of vision. The canoes had been right next to us. Where did they go? The raven just hopped further along. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came from the water, and just as quickly as it came, it stopped. I swallowed and continued my slow walk down the river, avoiding touching the water where I could. Frick, frick, frickety frick. I kept whispering. I had walked far beyond where our canoes should have been. Finally, what felt like minutes later, the raven stopped and landed on top of the edge of Joy's canoe, giving me a smug croak. As I took the final steps toward the canoe, I came to a sudden stop, just out of reach. I had come to the literal end of my rope. I shuddered as I heard a splash in the water and stared at the canoe, then back down the rope. The raven croaked impatiently. You're just teasing me now. I groaned, and the raven seemed to shake his head. I brought my hand to the end of my rope and reached as far out as I could with my foot to the canoe, barely hitting it with my toes. Come on, don't be a little bitch, Rose, I whispered and continued to struggle and stretch as far as I could. Then everything went to hell. Joy screamed. Raven flew off, smacking me in the head. I let go of the rope as I tumbled into the water, and it started to whisper shh, and it slowly, ever so slowly, raised in pitch. I sat there in the water in shock and listened for my sister, only to find the world silent of living things. All the while, just out of sight in the fog, the whisper of the river began to increase. I rolled over and grabbed onto the canoe, running up the bank and pulling it with me as the current picked up speed. Joy, I screamed to no response. Shit, 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 shit. I listened to the water and couldn't hear anything over its rapidly increasing speed. What had started as a whisper turned into a groan, and slowly, very slowly, the groan turned into a scream. The scream of a sow, the scream of a whirlpool. I threw my hands over my ears to no avail, and I began bawling. The fog began to choke me and wind its way down my throat and into my lungs. It was the familiar feeling of drowning. I could no longer scream, even as I recognized what was beginning to breach the surface of the river. I like to think I have a good imagination. How you'd hear they had a great maw filled with rows of teeth, and their eyes shone a sinister black, and you think you understand what someone's saying. Apparently, my imagination failed to understand what my elders had always told me. Tohij was something much worse. Tohij was a monster I could never comprehend without seeing. As he slowly broke the water, I could understand how his gaping jaws were able to start a whirlpool, how the flick of his tail caused the river to rush, and how his onyx eyes froze me in place as he climbed up the river bank on all fours. I choked and coughed on the fog as I tried to scream. I heard Tohij whisper, "You smell yummy. Please, someone explain how a gaping maw of nothing but teeth, a long serpentine tongue, and no lips can whisper, and please explain how." The low voice rattled in my brain, layered on itself in many languages, echoing and ricocheting through my skull. The smell of Tohij hit me as he slowly stalked me, the rotten flesh in his teeth and the putrid scent of his own partially scaled body, its diamond-shaped head reminding me of an alligator. I rolled over to vomit, adding to the already rank bouquet. A graveled and mirthless laugh came from deep within his chest. I scooted back up the steep edge of the bank, scraping my hands as I went. I watched as Tohij licked his teeth, salivating at the scent of my blood and fear. There'd be no outrunning him. He could smell me wherever I went. I had to think, and think quickly. Tohij isn't like Torega. Tohij is a logical, thoughtful being. What did Raven do when he fought Tohij last? He did the thing he always does. Raven tricked him. Wait. I screamed at him. I swear the thing grinned in amusement as it tilted its head. I'm just like you. I jumped up, hoping to feign confidence. Its chest rumbled in another laugh. I swear I am. I am also a thing that eats man. I smell your nukabedza. Well, shit, it was worth a shot, I murmured. Tohij continued stalking toward me, his scent hitting stronger and stronger. The sound of the water dripping off of him became as loud as the river, and the thick taste of the fog was clogging my chest. I bit back tears. I was dead, and all I could do was hope my sister could get away, that I'd be tasty enough Tohij would be satisfied. I stood there frozen as it stalked toward me, its long powerful limbs built just as much for crawling on all fours as to walk upright. Run, little monster, it taunted, voice rattling my skull. I swallowed and stood my ground. If you don't believe me, take me back to my sister. I'll show you. What I assumed was a laugh rumbled out of its throat. If the little monster insists. The fog dissipated into a path, and I heard my sister coughing at the other end. As I walked, I watched the ground and trees before me, thinking of how what I needed was there, how Raven once outsmarted Tohij, how I could too, even if it was me just copying him. One tree finally gave me what I needed, and I swallowed while staring at the fungus before bending to tie my shoe. I stealthily grabbed the mushroom, slipping it in my palm. This was going to hurt both of us, but hopefully be worth it, and I knew Joy would live through it. When I finally saw my sister, shivering in the canoe, I began speaking again. We have so much in common, and I have something you want. Friends share things, don't they? I knelt next to my cowering sister, giving her what I hoped was an evil grin. What do you have in common? What do you have that they want? She shivered. I slowly pulled a knife out of one of my pockets. You, of course. You're going to be delicious. Joy finally fell onto her rear and began shrinking away. No, please no, you've always wondered how Bushmen are born, haven't you? I slowly stalked toward her, the fog somehow lifting enough I could see her clearly. I was going to do it. I was going to survive, with or without my sister. Does that make me evil? Possibly, hopefully. I swallowed as I felt a gentle nudge and the foul stench of rotten meat float around me. Joy's face paled before quickly turning green. Rose, what's behind you? I shivered and reminded myself not to look. Didn't you hear? Tohi is my friend. He's even letting me call him by a nickname. I shuddered as a gnarled claw wrapped around my throat when I said that. Yes, claiming that was a bad idea? Was it working so far? Yes. Tohij belongs in the river, but isn't he the fog? Didn't he become a part of the fog? The creature of mirage. I laughed. After all, we brought his boat onshore. He owns all that's been taken. My voice cracked and I began shaking. No matter how much I forced myself to look evil, I would never be able to match the aura behind me. That wasn't fish, dear sister. I leaned toward her and grabbed her by the ear. And that is what I have in common with Tohi. I quickly grabbed her by the back of the head and sliced my knife just in front of her ear, causing her to shriek with pain as blood began to quickly flow down her neck. I deftly pulled the misshapen mushroom out of the hidden part of my hand, shoving it into my mouth before it could really be seen. It was a wild stab in the dark from Legends, but I hoped it looked like I ate her ear. I flinched as she cried and I pulled her loose hair over her shoulder. I chewed and chewed as much as my brain screamed to get the mushroom out of my mouth, to stop myself from the pain it would cause. Suddenly, the grip on my neck tightened and I felt something lean over my shoulder as Joy stared in shock. I shuddered as that gravelly, monstrous voice whispered, I don't want a friend, even if you are also a monster. Still, I fought not to look as I felt the heat next to my ear. I don't need a friend to eat her. Besides, I want to eat you and your delicious smelling nukabedza. I frowned. I really ought to take care of that one of these days. The grip tightened. How does a monster like you smell so human? My head slowly began spinning. The scars on my back felt like they were tearing, and I tried to keep hold of my wits. I don't know, but since we are the same, at least grant me one request. A rumble of laughter. What would you like, little bushman? More tearing at my back, like something was digging into me. My sister gasped through her whimpers at the accusation. I shuddered. He thought I was willing to become a bushman, that I was willing to become one of the monsters that had stalked me at night just to survive, to give up my soul in order to achieve power, maybe on another day. I shifted my eyes until I saw Raven, then stared at my sister, willing her to pay attention, willing my now spinning head to stop until I was able to escape. How about a race for both souls? I could feel Tohij assess me. They're breathing down my neck. You invoke the old ones, a race it is. Just to satisfy you. I let out the breath I had been holding. Agreed. You against Raven. I swear the Raven smirked. I knew he was just another raven among all ravens, but he would have to do, even if he didn't care and was only satisfying curiosity. Tohij roared. Joy fell further into herself. I fell to my knees, covering my ears, and startled, the raven took off, heading upriver. I chanced a glance behind me. Better hurry and catch up, I whispered to the monster, hoping that he was bound to his agreement to a race, and he was, but not before pain, not before he slashed down my shoulder and into my back. He would never hear my scream as he ran into the river. Fog dissipated as he went, the water swirling and churning around his enormous body. He began swimming upstream, as swiftly as he could as the raven glided along leisurely, and we sprinted to our canoes, pushing them quickly into the water and taking off downriver as fast as they would carry us, as fast as the river could take us back into the full sun, me barely stopping the world from spinning as we went, stopping from crying as my shoulder and back bled out. It was miles of paddling, miles of our chests burning from both our rush and the lingering cough. On top of that, I was nauseous and barely holding my stomach in. When we were finally far enough to feel safe, we pulled off the river. Sitting on shore, holding back frustrated and scared tears, we pulled out the bottle of vodka we'd brought with us. Through our sips, our coughs wouldn't subside, the fog clogging our chests and drowning us. I finally really looked at Joy when she hissed. She'd touched the gash I'd made next to her ear and it began bleeding again. Slowly I stood and managed to keep my footing. Joy gasped, and as I looked over my shoulder, she was staring at my back. Oh yeah, I forgot about that, I said as I gave her a small smile. No wonder my clothes feel so wet. She only stared, the frenzy of fear, shock and sadness swirling behind her glassy eyes. I struggled to the canoes and pulled out the sack Grandma Judy had given us. Digging through it, I found the salve for cuts, then sighed as I pulled out the herbs for our coughs. God, she had been right. If she had only given us medicine to induce vomiting though. I handed Joy the salve and her share of the herbs. I remember watching her treat herself as I slowly chewed the medicine, trying to not aggravate my head. Hey Joy, I croaked out. Yeah, then nothing. As I finally passed out, there was nothing eventful out of the remainder of the trip. When I finally woke up, I woke up with a fever but managed to fight through it. My back felt crusty under bandages and my mouth tasted like something had died in it from all the vomiting. I had been passed out 2 days. Joy and I spoke little the first few days after I woke up. It wasn't until we passed Ruby that she finally asked questions. How did you know? Why the hell did you cut my face? What were you thinking? Questions. The answer is, I listened to the old stories. How Raven had once convinced Tohij he was a friend. How Raven had beaten Tohij in a race to prevent more deaths of people in the river. How a mushroom can look so much like an ear it could convince even a monster. And I remembered how Bushmen are born. How monstrous they are even among the other evils. Sometimes the scary stories are more than just a warning. Sometimes they're a handbook. Past Ruby, we began chatting again. Began laughing again, ignoring the occasional tingles down our backs, ignoring the whispers, me ignoring the tearing of my new gouge, until we finally returned to Galena and headed home, where the feeling of eyes on my back finally disappeared. And that's how our summer canoe trip went. Joy wants me to tell you that she wasn't that scared, that she knew one of us would think of something, even though the sounds of random birds made her scream and distract me. Shouldn't she have done more as the older sister? Now she's swatting me. Hey Joy, my back still hurts. She's telling me to get over it. It's healed and my scars always hurt. And don't worry kids, the waters are fine. In Koyukon belief, specific pieces of the soul are the Yega and Nukabedza.